Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome 2008 Olympian Regional Race Officer and RCYC Rear Commodore of Fleet, Martha Henderson. Welcome.
Wow. Oh. Thank you, Rivy. Oh. Thanks very much. Hi to everybody. See some familiar faces in the crowd and hopefully some familiar faces out in media land. Thank you very much for having me. I always enjoy coming to Etobicoke Yacht Club, either to race or to cruise, or to come to one of Irene McNeil's great race management seminars. And so I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. I'm here to talk about, well, I guess the racing rules, but I really like to approach the racing rules as to not use them and to get yourself around the race course without getting into trouble. Because they're really written for you not to hit other boats. So the rules are meant to have people avoid collisions, keep people safe, because if you're entangled like this, you're not actually racing, and because you're an obstruction now on the race course, but it doesn't do you any good to in your race position. It also means that you're probably in a protest room all night, so you can't enjoy the party, and potentially somebody could get injured. So the way I look at the racing rules is just don't hit people. It's not fun. But we'll go through them so that you can actually, or we'll go through a certain aspect of them so that you can use them to your advantage and knowledge so that you can actually do well on the race course, because that's kind of how I look at them. And there are people who are much better versed on the technical aspects of the rules. There are great judges courses you can take. People like Andrew Alberti, Scott Collinson, Irene, they are all excellent in the technical aspects of the rules. I know them on how to write a protest, but I more use them to how to make me a better sailor and how to get me around the race course fast. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about the conduct of a race, which is actually in the racing rules part 3. And so the racing rules, or all of our rules, consist of a bunch of things. One of them is the Racing Rules of Sailing, this book, which is also online at racingrulesofsailing.org. And the rule book changes every 4 years. It is there's a bunch of people at World Sailing who go over these rules with a fine-tooth comb. Every comma, every full stop, everything is reviewed, but they don't change it until after the Olympics. So the Olympics happen usually in the summertime, and then the new racing rules get implemented in January of the following year. So the new rules will be out in the fall of 2024, and the new rule book will probably be published in January of 2025. So if you buy a new rule book now, you'll be up to date, but it'll only be valid for probably about 6 to 8 months. The other rules that govern a race are your class rules, or the perf low rules. Those are inherent in what we do. And unless they're changed by the notice of race, all of your class rules and everything apply. So the new structure of the documents is that if it's written in the racing rules, and it's written in the class rules, it's not repeated in the notice of race, and nothing in the notice of race is repeated in the sailing instructions. That's the intention. So it actually makes you look at more documents, but there's less chance for error because it's not repeated. So if your sailing instructions and your notice of race are repeating things, it shouldn't, but people are still learning that this is the new format. So all of these things make up what you need to go on the water and to go racing. The final thing is that if we make a mistake writing one of those things, or if something has to change, then there are amendments, and those get posted on your official notice board. The big joke between race officers is that if you want to hide a secret, put it in the notice of race and the sailing instructions. It's amazing how many people don't read them. And if you're new to sailing or new to racing, if you want to make a valuable contribution to your crew, read your sailing instructions and your notice of race, because then you'll know when the starting time is, you'll know what the course is, and you'll know what the colors of the marks are. And more time people lose races because they don't know where the next mark is or where they're supposed to go than being really smart on the race course. And knowing your flags and knowing what the race committee is doing. It's a undervalued, important aspect of racing. I always take a Ziploc bag, or if you're really technical, you can laminate your sailing instructions. I always have it folded so the course diagrams are facing out, and keep the Ziploc bag in the pocket of our shark spinnaker bag so I can grab it quickly and know where it is. One time when the J24, we were racing in Youngstown, and our crew who was in charge of making sure down below was tidied up so much that she threw out the sailing instructions and notice of race. So we sailed. Thank God they didn't change the course, because it was course 4 and that's the only one we knew. So we ended up winning that Youngstown, but it was a bit hilarious at the time. So the notice of race. So in the racing rules, it says that the notice of race shall be made available to each boat that enters an event before she enters. So that means that now the notice of race signals the turn on of the registration. It has to include the date, time, and place, how much the registration is, anything that you need to actually show up to the regatta. So if there's a measurement situation and a boat has a weight limit, you have to state that whether that weight limit is going to be on or off, because that, if it's changeable, because that will depend or have an impact on the crew that people bring. So anything like that is important. Special notices, meaning if you have to launch your boat in a different location from where the actual event is, that has to happen. Everything that is in the notice of race and in the sailing instructions are grounds for protest. The recommendation now is to not have your social functions and the start times of the band in the sailing instructions or in the notice of race, because arguably, if the band doesn't start performing on time, somebody could protest that. It sounds ridiculous, but we all know sea lawyers who could be nigglers and they could do that. So the recommendation is to have a separate document for the social functions, etc. But the notice of race is everything that a competitor would need to register for the regatta and show up. Everything. So if you want to know that information for your crew, you need to read this document. The sailing instructions are, and it's the same rule, shall be made available to each boat before racing begins. So that means that they don't actually have to be available until the morning of the event, because the information that is in that document is the course location, the colors of the marks, VHF radio channels, and that type of thing. But I can't tell you how many complaints I got at RCYC from sailors who were expecting that the sailing instructions were going to come out a month in advance like they used to, because they don't have to come out until 2 to 3 days beforehand, because what you want to do is make sure you have the mark colors that you're saying. You want to have the fleet splits. I mean, you can't put that up as an amendment, because some people do that to get the sailing instructions out there quicker, but that's essentially what this is for. The sailing instructions is everything that you need to get out onto the water. And that is a change. That's been a change in the last couple of years. And again, the information is not being repeated. There's a new platform that has been in effect for a while that more and more people are using now. It's called RRS. It's an online platform that you can get all of your documents, and you can file your protests, you can file your scoring inquiries all through an online platform. So you don't actually have to go to the club to do all that paperwork. Most places are implementing that now. So all the resources should be on the event website, and more people are using their website as the official notice board. We, being on an island, sometimes do both because Wi-Fi goes down all the time, but usually we have it online and on the boat. But I remember being very young and knowing the sailing instructions, and I was sailing on the CNC 34 Cookie Monster, for any of those of you who have been around for a long time. And everybody else started on the wrong start flag, and I'd read that we were supposed to be on whatever start flag we were on, and so we were the only ones who started. And I think it was an RCYC Open, and we filed for redress and won, and ended up winning the regatta. I wasn't very popular, but we did the right thing. So decision to race. So this is a big one as well. And I think there's a lot of question about the decision to race, but I wanted to put this in here because it is actually in the racing rules that, the race committee can go out and they can set a course up and do that, but it's up to the competitors to know their own skills, their own abilities of themselves and their crew before they start a race. So if you as a competitor are not comfortable racing, then you shouldn't be racing. It's not the obligation of the race officer to know everybody's skill level or comfort zone. The race officer usually can tell if things are getting out of control and may send people in. But if it's an important championship that has qualifications or other long-term impact, they're expected to run it within the wind limits that the class has given them. So it's up to you. It's on you to decide whether or not your boat, your crew is capable of handling the conditions. Okay, so the starting sequence, I'm sure this is very familiar to people. Again, it is in the rule book, and one of the reasons why I keep referring back to it is that just as I go through the race officer training, it's interesting to find out what people think is actually arbitrary and what you choose to do as a race officer versus what is actually in the rule book. And the starting sequence, most places are using the standard starting sequence that is written in Racing Rule 26. So you don't actually have to write that in the documents because it's in the rule book. So if it's not written anywhere, it's this 5-minute starting sequence. It is that's standard. The only time that it will be written in the sailing instructions is if the race officer or the organizing committee decides to change Racing Rule 26 and make it 3 minutes or whatever. So this is the standard one. And while there are sounds that are accompany the flags up and down, it's the flags that matter. If the sound goes off or there's a random sound that happens, that's fine, just ignore it, but it's the flag. And so I always designate somebody on the crew to watch the flags because random sounds can go off at times and you're not really sure sometimes what's happening, but we have sound boxes and things and they can misfire. So it's the flag, watch the flag. Don't go back on a general recall until you absolutely see the general recall flag. So the starting sequence, the class flag goes up at 5 minutes. 4 minutes to the start goes up the preparatory flag or one of the penalty flags. This is an old slide, so it doesn't have the U flag. I don't know if you've encountered the U flag, but it's becoming more and more popular. It's the nicer version of the black flag. So the U flag it will go up instead of the preparatory flag at P, and that means that you can't go over the line within 1 minute before the start. or you are disqualified, you get a UFD. Same thing as the black flag, but the UFD doesn't carry over. So if some reason the race is abandoned or something abandoned or postponed, it wipes out the black flag. Sorry, wipes out the OCS designation. With the black flag, doesn't matter. If you're called over within 1 minute to go, you can be, that black flag carries over until that race is sailed, right? It's really awesome when that happens in a world championship and there's no wind for 2 days and you sit out for 2 days with a black flag hanging over your head. But so most people are going for the U flag now, unless people are just getting unruly. It's very rare that you'll see the 1 minute rule. It's used sometimes in the US, but it's not, it's being phased out because it's not seemed to be fair, especially on a long starting line. Because if you're on a long starting line and you're over in the middle, it takes a really long time for you to get out and around and get back. It's the round the ends rule. So if you're over within 1 minute, you have to round one or the other end of the starting line. So if you're at the end, you just pop around and off you go. But if you're in the middle, it's very difficult. So it's being phased out. A lot of time what's happening now with race officials is if they see that the start is unfair, or if all the boats are going over early, they can put up a postponement flag before the start and restart the race without having a general recall. If you put the general recall flag up, you have to take it down. You have to take it down and wait a minute, and then you've got to get everybody back, take it down, wait a minute, and go ahead. The postponement, you can do it before, take it down, wait a minute, and go off again. So some people are getting confused about why the race committee will postpone just before the start. That's a sort of an escape hatch if something's gone sideways. Either the wind has majorly shifted, or they realize partway through the starting sequence that the starting line's too short, too long, whatever. And if it's an unfair start, they'll just postpone it, fix it, and go again. It's a quick way to do it. So that's why that's happening. And obviously the individual recall, call people back. If there's if they can't identify everybody who's over, but if they can identify that only one boat is not over, then they can identify everybody who is over. So they can say everybody except for the one boat. That's not very fair and very nice to people, but that can happen. And the general recall is when everybody is over. So does anybody have any questions on that? About everybody experiencing that? And does it know what I mean? Yeah, Steve.
With the individual recall, it used to be, I presume it still is, that is one signal that has to have a sound.
Yes, it does. So
if the flag goes up and there's no sound, then probably going to get off the boat.
well,
If the sound goes and the flag doesn't go up,
so now the rule is that the flag has to go up within 5 seconds of the start with a sound. But if you don't hear it, it doesn't mean potentially that it didn't go off. So that's the thing. So you apply for redress, and everybody in the race committee said, oh yeah, a sound went off, no problem. And you could say, well, I didn't hear it. That's not ground. Just because you didn't hear it is not grounds for redress. And the other thing I should mention in that vein, because it's a good question, that the question, just make sure everybody heard it, was that the individual recall flag requires a sound, which is true. But you know, if it's a horn or a whistle or a gun, then it's the flag has to go up within 5 seconds and the sound has to accompany it. The hails on the VHF are also just courtesy. So it's the flag as well. And usually it's written in the sailing instructions that communications over VHF radio will be a courtesy. Because if you've got like 5 boats that are over early, there's a time lag in between the first boat and the first number and the last number. So it is a bit unfair, but fleets ask for it, and it's done as a courtesy as opposed to redress. So the definition of racing, which is also important, is a boat is racing from her preparatory signal, so the 4-minute with the P flag or the penalty flag, until she finishes and clears the finish line and marks or retires, or until the race committee signals a general recall, postponement, and abandonment. So the important thing to note there is it's the P flag is when all the rules turn on. So, I mean, you can be sailing around. You don't want to hit anybody. If you hit somebody between the 5 and the 4 and you have a protest and there's damage, they'll say, well, who's on starboard and who's on port for insurance purposes. But you're racing actually from the 4-minute gun. So that's when all of the rules in Part 2 turn on. The definitions are part of the rule book that a lot of people don't pay attention to, and they're actually the things that give meaning to all the other rules. Because if you don't know when you're actually racing, it's difficult to determine what rules are applying or how you have to behave on the race course or in and around. Sorry, go forward. Oh. And then the definition of a start, which is also interesting, and this is a change because it used to be any part of the boat in normal position. Now it's the hull, and that goes for both the start and the finish. So it's the hull. It's not the bowsprit. It's not the spinnaker pole. It's not the spinnaker. It's not a body hanging over the trapeze. It's the actual physical bow of the boat, and that's what they're looking for. So a boat starts when her hull, having been entirely on the pre-start side, so that means the entire boat has to be on the pre-start side of the starting line, and having complied with 30.1, and that 30.1 lists all the penalty flags, the black flag, the U flag, and the I flag. Any part of her hull crosses the starting line from the pre-start side of the course. Like, I mean, blah, 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 your tongue gets twisted. So that means, if you take a look, the boat in this picture, Canada, us, that's the Olympics in 2008, we had started because our boat was across the starting line. The Germans, as you can see, who are on the far right-hand side of the picture, had not yet started, even though the starting gun had gone off. So that's just a nuance. However, if when they're calling the line early, that rule is written that if any part of your boat, body, hull, whatever, is over the line, then you are OCS. But you actually officially start when your bow crosses the starting line. And unless otherwise stated, you have 4 minutes to start after the starting signal. Sometimes that gets amended depending on the types of boats, and if you're having a fun race, that'll change, but normally you have 4 minutes from your start to when you would be considered a did not start, or a DNS. Sailing the course. So the boat sails the course, and this is what they call the string rule. I always think of Sheldon Cooper on Big Bang Theory and the string theory that he worked on for so long through that whole series. But it's the string that represents the track from the time to when she starts to when she finishes, when drawn taut. So the string has to go around each one of the marks, and passes the gate in the direction from the course of the previous mark. So this kind of gets into a bit sea lawyer-ish about how you sail your course, but you have to think, if you've missed a mark and you're wanting to go back and undo it, what was your path from the previous mark? And you have to undo yourself to go back over. And while you're undoing yourself, if you make that mistake, you have no rights, because it's like you're doing a penalty turn and you're exonerating yourself. You have no rights at all. The one thing that's new in the rules now is NSC, which is a designation that the race committee can give if they have noticed that a boat did not sail the course. So you don't have to protest. The race committee doesn't have to protest the individual. They just have to note down that they saw that the boat did not sail the course. If you don't agree, you file for redress, and then you go through the protest situation. But the race committee can say, I saw that boat, they missed it, they didn't go around the offset mark. Most of the times that happens because someone's gone around the gate incorrectly, or they've gone around the offset, they've missed the offset, and then they get scored an NSC, which is like a DNF, but it's more explicit as to what's happened. Does that make sense? The string theory? Okay. That's not new, that's pretty common. I think it's funny because you don't have people on the race course with string trying to figure out whether or not they went around the marks, but that's what happens when you go into the protest room. Okay. Oops. Okay. So again, I just put up the basic rules because I was asked to talk about rules, but as I say, this is all about not hitting people. And my dad used to have this saying that was, a yacht impaled on another yacht does not sail faster than a yacht sailing free. So if you can avoid hitting somebody, then you're going to go faster, and you can figure it out at the bar afterwards or in the protest room. But it's basic. Starboard has right of way over port. That's racing rule number 10. I put this up there because avoid contact is actually a part of the rules. So it's your obligation to avoid contact with another boat. So there is that poem about someone being dead right, and they were as dead as if they were wrong. So it's the same type of theory. You have to avoid people. Safety, fun, and damage, because it's just we do have a lot of speed, a lot of momentum. The boats are very heavy. We're on water. Accidents can happen, and it can be dangerous. And people don't want to come out. I mean, I can't count how many people who've come out and had gone racing, and then there's been a collision. They're like, I don't want to go sailing again. And that's part of what we do, is try to encourage people to come into the sport and have a good time. Mark room. This is one of the ones that may change. There's a proposal for a change to Rule 18 for mark room that Dave Perry has been leading a working group on at World Sailing about, and I'll just wait for that to come out, and then we're going to attend a Dave Perry course. And if you get the opportunity to attend a Dave Perry course, I would, because he's the best at explaining the rules. He makes it a lot of fun. He's the American Olympic rules advisor for years, and is now the head of the racing rules subcommittee at World Sailing. He's fun. He's just a fun guy. And then, so when boats are overlapped, the outside boat should give the inside boat mark room. If you're arguing with the person, the other boat, as to whether they have mark room or not, you're not sailing your boat fast. You're screaming, you're yelling, saying no room. Yeah, sometimes it's better just to let them go, and for you to either go around the other mark if it's a gate, or to slow up and win and tuck in, because that person's yelling, everybody's yelling. Yelling does not equal speed. Yelling usually equals boats going slow. So, and then the two of you are yelling and fighting, and the boats who are coming behind, like you could be I've seen this many times where boats are trying to argue over who has mark room. They're all going slow and they're all drifting away from the mark, and the boat behind them sneaks in and goes around, and it's like, well, yeah, good job. Thank you very much. you like it when you're in the boat behind position. And so I hope the point is that the rules are there, but if you have to choose when you're going to use them. Because if you start fighting with people on the race course because you've learned these rules and you want to prove that you have mark room, and you lose 2 places because that happens, like who's the winner and who's the loser in those cases? Rules are important, but it's like I often find with people who are new to the sport, they get their head very caught in all the nuances. Well, what if this happens, and what if that happens, and if, like, when you create the overlap, it's like, just get around the mark faster and have your crew work better, and you'll beat the guy anyway if you like take your sails down better and you get your boat up to speed faster, rather than yelling with the person next to you as to whether or not you were overlapped 3 or 4 boat legs before. Because if your spinnaker's still up when you're doing that, you get great photos, but you're not winning you're not having great trophies. So the definition of finish is interesting, and it's highly complicated, or I find that the rules gurus make it complicated. And it's when the bow of your boat crosses the finish line. You don't actually have to fully sail through and clear the finish line. You have to clear the finish area, but you don't have to sail through. It's when your bow goes across, because if there's a current and your bow goes across and you get pushed back, you've still finished, but it's when your bow goes across. You can correct an error, so you can go back and undo and fix the string, and then come back and finish again, which is fine. But if you continue to sail the course, you haven't finished. So if you round, let's say you round the pin at the finish, you continue to sail upwind, you continue to sail the course again, you actually haven't finished because you continue to sail. Now that's is one of those weird rules, but because most of the time a race officer will say, hey, you finished ages ago. But if you're in the Olympics and you keep sailing the course because you haven't counted how many times you've gone around, in the rules it says you haven't actually finished. So, but you do have to keep clear of everybody. If you finish, you got to clear out. But again, it's a fairly simple action. You just bow crosses the finish line and you're finished. Taking the penalty under Rule 44.2 is a kinetics. That's the pumping, rocking, and nooching rule. So that's more for dinghies. So if a small boat is doing too many kinetics and they get flagged right at the finish line, they have to go and do their spin and then finish again. So that's what that is. I was a real expert in the J24 of letting my spinnaker sheets all the way out and letting the spinnaker go way out to try to cross the finish line first. You can't do that anymore. That was disappointing. So resources, racing rules of sailing. How am I doing on time? Oh, good. Racing rules of sailing. Again, the book. Racingrulesofsailing.org. It's interactive. It's on it's on laptop. Another resource that I didn't put up here, but I should. But Andrew Alberti, who is an international judge from RCYC, has been publishing articles that have dynamic diagrams. He's been publishing articles for the better part of 25, 30 years, and he explains the nuances to the rules very well as well. And all you have to do is just Google search Andrew Alberti racing rules, and he's got a website, and it's really cool to watch the diagrams and how the boats move. It makes it easier to understand. The Dave Perry explaining the racing rules. I think the last time Dave Perry was up here, he did a talk at National Yacht Club. He does them online all the time. I'm a big fan, as you can tell. And he explains the rules very, very simply. It's really good. He always talks about the rules and the your situations in the why and the how. How did you get there? Why were you there? And then what happened? It's very simple, very straightforward. When rules turn on and off. And the Northview Speeds and Smart courses are also very, very good to demonstrate the different rules, how they work in practice, and how you would take them and use them into a protest. I think the Northview courses are really great, and they're all online as well. But as I say, I think that the best part of the rules are not to use them and to sail fast. Because if you get your head in the rule book, then the last thing you're doing is sailing fast. I think. Yeah. Are there any questions? Steve, go ahead.
Sorry.
No. Ask away.
Can we go back to finishing?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we encounter here a lot is dying wind in the evening.
Yep.
And current.
Mm-hmm.
And so under the definition of finishing, might get your bow across the finish line.
Yep.
You finish.
Yep.
But what happens if the current causes you to drift into a mark or the finishing boat before you've cleared the finish area?
Yes. So that is a complicated rule. If you hit a mark, you haven't actually finished completely. So your bow crosses, but you've hit a mark. So you do have to do your spin and then cross again.
And unwind the string.
And unwind the string. Yeah.
So it's you got your bow across and you finish.
Yeah, finish. And the race committee will record you there.
So now
But you've hit it.
You got to have your head
Yeah.
working and get yourself clear of the finish line.
Yes.
And other boats.
Yes.
And marks and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. So the question was, if you bow goes across and then you hit a mark, you still have to that's still a mark of the course. So you have to do your spin and then refinish again. The race committee will put you down twice and then they'll realize what you've done. But yeah, you have to keep clear of, you can't be hitting marks or race committee boats once your bow goes across. Yeah, it's one of those nuanced ones.
Under that circumstance, if our bow's across, we fire up the engine and take off.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah. That's fine. You can do that. Because you have finished and you've cleared the course. So yeah, you can do that. You can sorry, can they hear the questions in the room or should I repeat them? No, I can't. Okay, so the question was, if your bow goes across and you're stuck there, can you fire up your engine and off you go? The answer to that is yes, you can. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you have to make sure your bow's crossed. Yeah, make sure your bow is crossed. Yeah.
But if your bow crossed, you're going to get a signal.
Potentially, it depends. Some people do, some people don't. It's not required in the rules to give you a signal when you finish. And if you're finishing with 5 boats and they're like that is something I got. There's a lot of race officers who do not give you sounds at the finish. You do not have to do that. So it doesn't mean a sound at the finish means absolutely nothing. It's just a horn person who hasn't had anything to do all day and they want to fire a horn. Sorry, Bill McNaughton, if you're listening, he's our horn guy and he likes to fire the horns. So it means nothing. There's nothing in the rules or requirements, unless it's written in the sailing instructions that that's what they're going to do, that they have to do that. I've never seen that written before. Like for kid regattas, we always give a horn to the last little feller who's crossing the line going, yay, good job. But in most racing, especially if you have multiple fleets and one group is finishing and the other one is starting, you're not gonna have a lot of random sounds going off because it's gonna get confusing. So they don't have to do that. That means nothing. Sorry.
What kind of advice would you give me if somebody really intentionally wants to hit you and obstructing you on the course.
So the question is, what would you do if someone is intentionally trying to hit you? So there's a couple things you can do. You can talk to the person and ask them why not, why, and take them to the bar. But there are rule 2. There's a rule 2. It's fair sailing. You can put a protest in under fair sailing, but you're going to have to demonstrate why they're doing that, and they could say, well, no, sorry, I was just sailing my course. Rule 2 is very serious. It's one of the fundamental rules. It's about fair sailing and good sportsmanship and all of that, which is what our sport is really very much about, because we're self-governing, and it can lead to a much harsher penalty, and it takes a really long time, and there can be it's the Rule 6-9 where you can be thrown out of sailing, and there's a tribunal that gets put together, and it's quite intensive. But if someone is being unfair and you believe that they're going after you and have targeted you, you can submit a protest, like you would do a normal protest, and cite Rule 2 and explain the situation, and the jury will hear it and decide from there. Yeah. It's unfortunate if that has to happen, but you know, it does happen, but yeah, it's too bad. So, yeah. Any other questions? Can you take questions online? Did anybody puts their hands up or anything online? We don't have that kind of technology? All right, that's okay. That's all right. That's fine. As I say, the biggest tips are read your notice of race and your sailing instructions. Know those. Have them in Ziploc bags, or if you have, you're doing sort of midweek racing or documents that apply across the whole summer, just laminate them and keep them on your boat. And know where the marks are. It's the biggest, #1 tip I can give in sailing, is know where the marks are. Cool. Any questions? More? No? Good? Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you out there on the race course. As a race officer, I'm the race officer for the first Amen. So if anybody is out there, come by. I'll take gifts of hot chocolate or hot chocolate with Baileys. Or the worst thing about the first Amen is that you never know if the marks are actually out yet. And so John O'Dwyer is usually in his condo with his binoculars, and I'm in LCD going around, and he's yelling at me going, I know that mark's there. I'm like, it's not there, because I'm here and it's not there. So anyway, come out for the first Amen. That's great. And I think we're going to have a lot of great racing all over the lake this year. I'm just going to put a plug in. RCYC Royal Weekend is open to everybody. It's not, and it's the Labor Day long weekend. It was a huge party last year, live band on our front lawn looking over the city. Everybody's welcome. You're welcome to come and stay over. We're going to be doing a point-to-point race called Island Time, which we stole from a regatta in Saint Martin, the Heineken Regatta. And it's just going to be a fun point-to-point. I think we'll have a rum party, happy hour with a beer tent after racing. We're going back to the 80s, gang, and looking forward to having those parties. So we welcome everybody to come, and we look forward to coming to Etobicoke Open and to all the other open regattas in the area. I think all the registrations will be up within the next few weeks. So thanks for having me.